What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk to you about SoFi. I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause some volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So there's quite a few things to kind of talk on that could cause some volatility, starting off with data points. Overall, I'm pretty optimistic about this aspect for this week. So starting off on Tuesday, we have CPI. And over the last couple reports, a lot of the inflationary data has been positive. So of course, I think that is fair to assume that this will be no different. So that's going to be coming out on Tuesday. And then you do have on Wednesday PPI, manufacturing data. Thursday, retail sales, initial jobless claims, so the typical stuff for a Thursday. And then on Friday, you have permits, starts, and then Michigan consumer sentiment. All data points that I've mentioned have really moved to the market at one time or another. But I think overall, like I said, this aspect of this week, I'm relatively optimistic about. There is a lot of Fed speakers throughout the week as well. So depending on what they state, that could cause some volatility. Most likely, a lot of them are going to be talking about Trump and tariffs. So that's going to be a hot topic for them. And then kind of with that topic in mind, Trump, I don't really anticipate him to be doing all that much. I think all the damage that has been kind of stated was done last week. I don't really see him doing anything unless a country such as Canada or potentially even Brazil does retaliate. Then that might spark a little bit extra coming from him. But right now, the market is just going to be now waiting for August the 1st just to see if this was more of a bluff or if he's actually committed to raising the tariffs. So I don't really anticipate all that much coming from Trump, but of course, knock on wood. Aside from that, though, we do also have earnings season kicking off. Banks, and dependent on what happens with banks, that could trickle down to fintechs and just the broader market. But given everything and the companies that have so far unveiled their earnings, I don't really see any negatives. Of course, a lot of the big banks recently did raise their dividends, so I don't think logically they would be doing that ahead of their earnings if they were going to flop. So Bank of America, I know, recently did raise it. So I think at the end of the day, this upcoming earnings season should be a pretty good success. But of course, you never know what they give for future guidance. So at the end of the day, all of this could cause some volatility. You also do have SoFi just having massive amount of FOMO. So at the end of the day, over the last 1 month, it is up 43.73%. On a technical standpoint, it is just going like crazy. One thing to take note of, though, you might randomly see more and more analysts paying attention to it. I've always complained about this. Why analysts give ratings before earnings doesn't logically make sense. But given just this momentum, a lot of analysts might be somewhat selfish. And what I mean by that is if someone wants to get their name out there, they kind of look at hot stocks, right? SoFi is a huge hot stock. Basically, this last 2 weeks has been top 10 most heavily traded stocks. So everyone wants a piece of it, right? So they're writing a lot of articles about it. We did have on Friday, TD Cowen initiated coverage. So most likely you could be seeing the same type of that. Brand new firms giving ratings. And dependent on the rating, you might see it obviously move up higher. And one thing that has been very surprising that occurred with SoFi is that we did receive some negative ratings. So 11, 13, and 13. And for the most part, it didn't actually affect SoFi. In the past, that would have been huge, like a massive momentum killer, but SoFi seems to be very much hell-bent on really moving higher. And I think a lot of that has to do with just what SoFi is doing. Even though they haven't actually, like I've explained in the past, they haven't really given us the definitive date for crypto when they're going to be launching that. We know that's going to be coming. So I think just the multiple that they are receiving, the massive momentum that's happening with Bitcoin, it hitting all-time highs and just so much hype associated to that, I think some of that is rolling over into SoFi. So theoretically, that should continue this week. There isn't anything planned associated to SoFi, so no fireside chats, no interviews or anything like that. Going into this week, though, for shorts, 14.32% of the free float is being shorted, works out to be 155.35 million shares. So Shorts have honestly doubled down. I don't understand why. So on June the 26th, it was at 12.58. So they have been really increasing. You can kind of see from this yellow line right here. So when it comes down to their earnings, I think I mentioned this 2 videos ago, you're going to see a extreme move in one direction. Either SoFi is going to potentially show some red flags and you're going to see a significant pullback, or you're going to see shorts get squeezed. Shorts right now are trying their very best to slow SoFi down. And I think just generally right now, over the last 3 months, they have lost about roughly, I would estimate about $2.1 billion. So they have lost a lot of money. And as I've stated, whoever is shorting SoFi definitely does have very deep pockets. So anticipate shorts to be fairly active. Doesn't logically make that much sense for them to do that, but anticipate them to be fairly active. So something to keep in mind. Aside from all that though, when it comes down to the options, we did have a lot of options, open interest in the money options. So for an example, you had 24,000 at that 21, 14,000 at that 20, and then 80,000 at that 1650. So those were some of the hot ones. So most likely you will see a very nice bump up come Monday. Of course, you did see some transactions occurring after hours on Friday, which normally is relatively quiet. So I think market makers were covering some. So you see 1.05 million, 2.1, 1.3, 1 million, 1 million, 1 million, 1 million, quite a lot here. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can kind of see that market makers were covering. Even this one right here, 35.2, but all of this does not jive with the amount of options that needed to be covered. So most likely you will see a nice push higher come Monday, as market makers will have to cover a lot of these options. So that could really kickstart a nice Monday, no different than the last 2 weeks. So again, that's something to keep in mind. Going back over here though, looking at this upcoming week. So this upcoming week is a monthly chain. So you do have, for an example, 4,000 at that 12, 5,000 at that 13, 16,000 at that 14, 27,000 at 15, 28,000 at 16, 12,000, 17, and blah, 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 48 or 46,000 at that 20, 23,000 at that 21. So you might see a rollover going into this upcoming week. If for any reason it's able to close above 21, then you'll see a nice further push higher going into the next week. So things, I think honestly, how everything has played out for SoFi over the last 2 weeks has been the best case scenario. So given just the option chain, you might see that continue as well. So yeah, it's a very exciting time to be a SoFi investor. And as I've kind of stated, when it comes down to options, for those of you that do believe that SoFi is going to continue to move higher, I'd kind of avoid doing covered calls, because then that way you don't lose your shares, but you do whatever floats your boat. Aside from that though, with it at 21.20, that's where it closed on Friday. It is trading between this R3 and this R2. I'm looking at the 1 week chart on a side note. 23.86 is going to be that key point to really watch for. If it is able to get above that, then in theory, we can kind of go over to the 1 day, look at the classic, 28.40. So that's kind of, as I've kind of brought up, I think a couple of videos ago as well, a little bit far-fetched, maybe, leading into their earnings, but there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes, a lot of just momentum with SoFi, possible multiple changes as well. So yeah, I think in reality, that 23 is going to be a good realistic target for the end of the week, so 23.86. I don't really see any negatives this week unless Trump does really kind of start to stir things up, and as well when it comes down to those companies unveiling the earnings, if they start to signal some red flags, you might see a little bit of a pullback. But aside from all of that though, on the actual chart, there's not really much negatives to bring up, as I've brought up in the past. It's just the fact that it is overbought. So the first sign of weakness, in theory, you could see some negative consolidation, but SoFi seems to be everything that's been negative. Trump kind of talking about tariffs and whatever, SoFi just says F you and just goes up. So it's a fun time to be a SoFi investor. So let me know your general thoughts. Where do you see things going? Do you think that this week is going to be the consolidation week where it could potentially go down, going back over here to, let's say, that 1950, or you never know, 1695? Or is this the week that does continue to push higher, 2386, or you never know, maybe between that $28 and $23 range? Where do you see things going? One final thing, pop over to my Patreon. I do give buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point, and even yours truly, SoFi. I did put out a signal saying that it was going to go to roughly around that $21 range, and lo and behold, that's where it did close. I did give some further updates on where I see things going afterwards, so pop over there, take a look. Link in the description below and also the comments. Hopefully everyone's having a kick-ass weekend, and with all that, appreciate all of you watching.